The glass door shattered before Emma Chen could even scream. And suddenly, Derek was there, his fist bleeding and his eyes wild with the same rage she remembered from 3 years ago. Emma stumbled backward from the reception desk of the wellness center, where she worked as a physical therapist, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she thought it might break through. The ceramic mug she had been holding dropped to the floor, coffee spreading across the polished wood like spilled ink. "You think you can just ignore me?" Derek's voice was a snarl as he stepped through the ruined doorway, glass crunching beneath his boots. "You think you can block my number and pretend I don't exist?" Emma's throat closed up, her voice trapped somewhere between her lungs and her mouth. She had worked so hard to get away from him, spent months in therapy learning to sleep without nightmares, years building a life where she felt safe. And now he was here in her workplace with that look in his eyes that she knew too well. "Derek, you need to leave." Her voice came out thin and shaky, nothing like the confident tone she had practiced in her mirror for moments exactly like this. "I'm going to call the police." "The hell you are." He lunged forward, and Emma's hand shot out for the phone on her desk, but he was faster. He grabbed her wrist, his fingers digging into the exact spot where old bruises used to bloom purple and yellow, and Emma felt herself transported back 3 years to the apartment they had shared, to the nights she had spent locked in the bathroom waiting for his anger to pass. Then another voice cut through the reception area, deep and commanding and absolutely certain. "Let her go. Now." Emma's eyes snapped toward the hallway that led to the treatment rooms. A man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive charcoal suit that looked out of place in their modest wellness center. She recognized him immediately as Nathaniel Cross, the client she had just finished treating for a shoulder injury from his morning workout. But he looked different now. His usually warm brown eyes turned to ice, his entire posture radiating controlled fury. Derek's grip loosened slightly on Emma's wrist, confusion flickering across his face. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who's very familiar with how the legal system handles violent offenders." Nathaniel stepped forward, his movements measured and deliberate. "And someone who just watched you commit assault and battery, breaking and entering, and trespassing. That's looking like 3 to 5 years minimum, depending on the judge." "This is between me and my girlfriend." Derek's voice rose, defensive and aggressive at once. "Ex-girlfriend," Emma managed to say, finding her voice somewhere in the space that Nathaniel's presence had created. 3 years ago. I'm not seeing any relationship here." Nathaniel pulled out his phone with one hand while keeping his eyes locked on Derek. "I'm seeing a man who just committed multiple felonies in front of a witness. Emma, step away from him." Derek's hand tightened on Emma's wrist again, his nails digging into her skin. "She's not going anywhere until we talk." What happened next occurred so quickly that Emma's mind struggled to process it. Nathaniel crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, his hand closing around Derek's forearm with precision. He applied pressure to a specific point, and Derek's hand sprang open involuntarily, releasing Emma's wrist. Before Derek could react, Nathaniel had positioned himself between them, one arm extended protectively in front of Emma. "You have 3 seconds to leave before I call the police," Nathaniel said, his voice dangerously calm. 1. You don't know what you're dealing with." Derek's face flushed red, spittle flying as he spoke. "This isn't your business." 2. Something in Nathaniel's tone must have finally penetrated Derek's rage-addled brain because he took a step backward, his boots crunching on broken glass. "This isn't over, Emma. You hear me? This isn't over." 3. Nathaniel was already dialing, the phone to his ear. "Yes, I need to report a break-in and assault at Harmony Wellness Center on 5th and Maple. The perpetrator is a white male, approximately 6 feet tall, brown hair, wearing jeans and a black leather jacket. He's leaving the premises now but just committed assault in front of witnesses. Derek backed toward the shattered door, pointing at Emma with a shaking finger. You're going to regret this. You're going to regret all of this. Then he was gone, disappearing into the gray afternoon outside. Emma's legs gave out, and she found herself sitting on the floor behind the reception desk, her whole body trembling like a leaf in a storm. She could hear Nathaniel speaking to the police dispatcher, giving details in that same calm, authoritative voice, but the words seemed to reach her through water. Her wrist throbbed where Derek had grabbed her, and when she looked down, she could see red marks already forming in the shape of his fingers. The sight of it made her stomach turn, brought back memories she had worked so hard to bury. The first time he had grabbed her like that, he had apologized for hours afterward, brought her flowers, promised it would never happen again. The second time, the apologies had been shorter. By the 10th time, there had been no apologies at all. Emma. Nathaniel's voice was gentle now, so different from the steel it had contained moments before. He crouched down beside her, careful to stay at eye level rather than looming over her. The police are on their way. Are you hurt? She shook her head, then looked at her wrist again and realized that was a lie. Just my wrist. It's not bad. May I look at it? He waited for her nod before carefully taking her hand in his touch feather-light as he examined the marks. His jaw tightened when he saw them, a muscle jumping in his cheek. We should document this. Do you have your phone? Emma pulled her phone from her pocket with her free hand, her fingers still shaking. Nathaniel helped her take several clear photographs of her wrist from different angles, his movements professional and careful. She noticed his hands were steady, his breathing even, as if confronting violent men was something he did every Tuesday afternoon. I'm sorry, she whispered, though she wasn't sure what she was apologizing for Derek showing up, for the broken door, for falling apart in front of a client. Don't. Nathaniel's voice was firm but kind. Don't apologize for someone else's violence. You didn't do anything wrong. The police arrived within minutes. 2 officers who took statements from both Emma and Nathaniel, while a third photographed the scene and bagged pieces of the broken glass as evidence. Emma found herself recounting the whole story in a voice that sounded distant even to her own ears. How she had dated Derek 4 years ago, how his jealousy had escalated into control and then into violence, how she had finally escaped 3 years ago with the help of a women's shelter and a restraining order that had since expired. Has he contacted you recently? The older officer asked, his pen poised over his notepad. He's been texting from different numbers for the past month, Emma admitted, feeling stupid for not reporting it sooner. I kept blocking them, but he'd just get a new number. The messages started getting angrier. Do you still have those messages? Emma pulled them up on her phone, dozens of texts that had grown progressively more threatening. The officer's expression darkened as he read through them. We're going to issue a warrant for his arrest, and you need to file for a new restraining order immediately. This is stalking, harassment, and now assault. He's violated multiple laws. Nathaniel stood nearby during the entire interview, a solid presence that somehow made everything feel less overwhelming. When the officers finally left, promising to have a patrol car drive by regularly until Derek was apprehended, Emma's boss arrived. Linda took one look at the shattered door and Emma's pale face and immediately pulled her into a hug. Take the rest of the week off, Linda said firmly. Take as much time as you need. Your safety is what matters. I can't just leave you short-staffed, Emma protested weakly. Watch me handle it. Linda squeezed her shoulders. I'm calling a security company to install a proper system, and I'm getting that door replaced with reinforced glass. You just focus on taking care of yourself. Nathaniel cleared his throat softly. If I could make a suggestion, I know an excellent security firm. They handle my company's systems. I could have them here within the hour and they'll do it as a favor to me. Your company? Linda looked at him with new interest. Cross Industries. He said it simply, as if the name didn't belong to one of the largest real estate development firms in the state. Emma's head snapped up, her eyes widening. She had known Nathaniel was successful from the expensive watch he wore and the way he carried himself, but she hadn't realized she had been treating one of the wealthiest men in the city for the past 6 weeks. Linda's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. That's very generous, Mr. Cross. I'd appreciate that. It's the least I can do. Nathaniel pulled out his phone and made a quick call, speaking in low tones before hanging up. They'll be here in 45 minutes. In the meantime, Emma, I don't think you should be alone. Is there someone I can call for you? Family, friends? Emma's mind spun through her options. Her parents lived in California, a full 6-hour flight away. Her best friend Sarah was on her honeymoon in Greece. Her roommate wouldn't be home from her nursing shift for another 5 hours. I'll be fine, she said automatically. That's not what I asked. Nathaniel's gaze was steady, and Emma found she couldn't look away. I'm not comfortable leaving you alone when your ex-boyfriend is still out there and clearly unstable. Please, let me help. There was something in his voice that made Emma's carefully constructed walls crack just a little. She had spent 3 years learning to be independent, to rely on herself, to never need anyone the way she had needed Derek in those early days when his attention had felt like love instead of possession. But Nathaniel wasn't offering to take control. He was offering to help, and somehow that distinction made all the difference. I live about 20 minutes from here, she said quietly. My roommate won't be home until late. Then I'll drive you home and wait with you until your roommate arrives or until the police confirm they've apprehended Derek. Whichever comes first. He held up a hand before she could protest. I'm not trying to overstep. I'm just someone who happened to be here when you needed help, and I'd like to see this through until I know you're safe. That's all. Linda nodded approvingly. I think that's a good idea, Emma, and Mr. Cross, thank you for everything. Emma found herself nodding, too exhausted and shaken to argue. She gathered her purse and coat while Nathaniel spoke with Linda about the security installation, his voice calm and businesslike. When they stepped outside into the chilly October afternoon, Emma realized she was still trembling. Nathaniel's car was parked in the small lot beside the wellness center, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than Emma made in 2 years. He opened the passenger door for her, waiting until she was settled before closing it gently and walking around to the driver's side. Where to? He asked, starting the engine. Emma gave him her address, then leaned her head back against the leather seat, suddenly feeling like all the energy had drained out of her body. The adrenaline that had been keeping her upright was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and a familiar spiral of thoughts. What if Derek came back? What if he found out where she lived? What if the police didn't catch him? What if this never ended? Hey. Nathaniel's voice cut through the spiral. You're safe right now. I know your mind is probably running through every worst-case scenario, but right now, in this moment, you're safe. How did you know? Emma's voice came out scratchy. Because I've seen that look before. My sister. He kept his eyes on the road, but his hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. She had an ex who couldn't accept that their relationship was over. It got bad before it got better. What happened? Emma asked, then immediately felt intrusive. Sorry, you don't have to answer that. It's fine. She got a restraining order, he violated it, and he spent 18 months in jail. When he got out, he tried to contact her one more time, and my family's lawyers made it very clear that any further contact would result in a lawsuit that would drain every penny he had. He finally got the message. Nathaniel glanced at her, his expression serious. The system isn't perfect, but it can work if you have the right support. And Emma, you have support. Whatever you need, I'll make sure you get it. Why? The question burst out of her before she could stop it. You barely know me. I'm just a client. You're not just anything. Nathaniel's voice was firm. You're a person who was attacked, and I'm not the kind of man who walks away from that. Beyond that, I've been coming to see you twice a week for a month and a half. I know you grew up in San Francisco, that you moved here for graduate school and stayed because you fell in love with the city. I know you drink your coffee with too much sugar and not enough cream, and that you're training for a half marathon even though you hate running. I know you volunteer at a youth center on Saturday mornings, teaching kids about healthy movement patterns. I know when you're concentrating, you bite the inside of your cheek, and when you're pleased with a patient's progress, you do this little bounce on your toes that you probably don't even realize you're doing. Emma stared at him, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. She had noticed him too, of course. It was impossible not to notice Nathaniel Cross. He was handsome in an understated way, with strong features and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. But more than that, he was kind to the reception staff, always on time for his appointments, and listened carefully when she explained exercises instead of pretending he knew better. He asked about her weekend and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. He had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh at unexpected moments. But she had kept those observations locked away in a part of her mind labeled off-limits, because he was a client, and more importantly, because she had promised herself she wouldn't get involved with anyone until she was sure she had healed from what Derek had done to her. I didn't realize you noticed all that, she said softly. I notice a lot of things. Nathaniel turned onto her street, pulling up in front of her apartment building. This it? Emma nodded, and they made their way up to her third-floor apartment. She unlocked the door with hands that still shook slightly, stepping into the familiar space that suddenly felt less safe than it had this morning. Nathaniel followed her in, his eyes scanning the apartment with a professional thoroughness that told Emma he was assessing exits and security vulnerabilities. Deadbolt on the door is good, he said, but you need a chain lock too and a door stopper. Windows. Fire escape access from the living room window. Emma gestured toward it. The bedroom windows face the building next door, too narrow for anyone to climb through. Nathaniel walked over to the fire escape window, testing the lock. His frown told her everything she needed to know. This lock wouldn't stop a determined 12-year-old. I'm calling a locksmith. Nathaniel, I can't afford, Emma started, but he shook his head. It's not about affording it. Consider it a personal favor to me, because otherwise I'm going to spend all night worrying about whether your ex-boyfriend is climbing through this window. He was already dialing, and before Emma could protest further, he was speaking to someone about emergency lock installation. Emma sank onto her couch, watching him pace her small living room as he talked. He moved with the confidence of someone used to giving orders and having them followed, but there was nothing arrogant about it. He was just a man who saw a problem and took immediate steps to fix it. When he hung up, he turned to her with an apologetic expression. Locksmith will be here in 30 minutes. I hope that's okay. I know I'm being pushy. You're being protective, Emma said, and something in her chest loosened as she said it. There's a difference. Is there? Nathaniel sat down on the armchair across from her, careful to maintain distance. I'm trying not to be overbearing. I know you've dealt with someone who probably tried to control every aspect of your life. I don't want to replicate that dynamic." The fact that he was aware of that possibility, that he was actively trying to avoid it, made Emma's eyes sting with unexpected tears. Derek always made decisions for me and called it protection. He'd tell me what to wear because he was protecting me from other men's attention. He'd show up at my work to give me lunch because he was protecting me from skipping meals. He'd go through my phone because he was protecting me from friends who didn't have my best interests at heart. Everything was about control, but he always framed it as love. "That's not love," Nathaniel said quietly. "Love respects boundaries. Love asks permission. Love trusts." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Emma, I'm going to be very honest with you about something, and I hope it doesn't make you uncomfortable. I'm interested in you. I have been since the second appointment when you called me out for not doing my exercises at home and told me that my shoulder wasn't going to heal itself through wishful thinking." Despite everything, Emma felt a surprised laugh bubble up. "I was so worried I'd offended you." "You charmed me," Nathaniel corrected. "Most people treat me like I'm made of glass or money. You treated me like I was a patient who needed to do his homework. It was refreshing." His expression grew serious. "But I never said anything because you were my physical therapist, and that would have been inappropriate. And I'm only telling you now because I want you to understand why I'm here. It's not just because I witnessed something terrible. It's because I care about you and I want to help if you'll let me. But the moment you tell me to back off, I will. Your autonomy matters more than my interest." Emma's mind was reeling. Nathaniel Cross, Millionaire CEO, was interested in her. The same man who had just scared off her abusive ex and was currently installing new locks on her apartment was interested in her. It felt surreal, like something out of one of the romance novels she read late at night when she couldn't sleep. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "You don't have to say anything right now." Nathaniel's smile was gentle. "Today has been traumatic enough without adding pressure. I just wanted to be honest about where I'm coming from." The locksmith arrived then, a efficient woman in her 40s who took one look at Emma's window locks and made a disgusted sound. "These wouldn't keep out a squirrel. Good thing you called me." While she worked, Nathaniel made tea without asking, moving around Emma's small kitchen like he belonged there. He found the mugs in the cabinet above the sink, the sugar in the canister on the counter, the tea bags in the drawer by the stove. When he handed her a cup, it was exactly the way she liked it, and Emma realized he had been paying attention during all those casual conversations at the wellness center. "My sister used to have panic attacks after her ex showed up places," Nathaniel said, settling back into the armchair with his own mug. "Her therapist taught her this grounding technique. You focus on your senses. 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste." "Are you trying to ground me right now?" Emma asked, but her voice held no accusation, only curiosity. "Only if you need it. Your hands have been shaking since we sat down, and you keep looking at the door." His observation was gentle, not judgmental. Emma glanced down at her trembling hands wrapped around the warm mug. He was right. Her nervous system was still in overdrive, flooding her body with cortisol and adrenaline even though the immediate danger had passed. "Will you do it with me?" "Of course." Nathaniel set his mug down. 5 things you can see. I'll start. I can see your bookshelf that's organized by color, which I find oddly satisfying. I can see your watch, which probably costs more than my car," Emma said, and was rewarded with a surprised laugh. "I can see a photograph on your mantle of you with an older couple. Your parents. At my graduation from PT school, I can see a small scar on your left hand, between your thumb and forefinger. Cooking accident when I was 16. Thought I could flip a pancake without a spatula. I was wrong. Nathaniel's self-deprecating grin made Emma smile despite everything. I can see that you're starting to breathe a little easier. They continued through the exercise, the rhythm of observation and response slowly pulling Emma back into her body, back into the present moment. By the time they reached one thing to taste, Emma's hands had stopped shaking. The locksmith finished installing heavy-duty locks on both the window and the front door, adding a chain lock and showing Emma how to use a door stopper. "Nobody's getting in here without making a lot of noise," she promised. "And I mean a lot. These locks are commercial grade." After she left, Emma's phone rang. It was Detective Morrison, one of the officers who had responded to the wellness center. "We've apprehended Derek Vaughn," he said, and Emma felt her knees go weak with relief. "He was pulled over for running a red light about 40 minutes ago." When the officer ran his license, the warrant popped up. "He's in custody now, and given the severity of the charges and his violation of your previous restraining order, the judge is unlikely to grant bail. You'll need to come down to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement, but for tonight you can rest easy." When Emma hung up, she realized tears were streaming down her face. "They caught him," she whispered. "He's in jail." Nathaniel crossed the space between them without hesitation, pulling her into a hug that felt like safety itself. Emma let herself lean into him, let herself feel the solid warmth of his chest under her cheek, let herself take comfort in his steady heartbeat. His arms wrapped around her carefully, as if she was something precious that might break, and for the first time in hours, Emma let herself fall apart. She cried for the girl she had been when she met Derek, so eager to be loved that she had missed all the warning signs. She cried for the 2 years she had spent walking on eggshells, trying to be perfect enough that he wouldn't get angry. She cried for the nights she had spent in emergency rooms lying about how she got hurt. She cried for the 3 years she had spent looking over her shoulder, always waiting for him to find her again. And then she cried with relief because he was in jail, and the police said he was likely to stay there. And for the first time in 3 years, she might actually be safe. Nathaniel held her through all of it, one hand rubbing slow circles on her back, murmuring quiet reassurances that she was okay, that she was safe, that he had her. When the tears finally stopped, Emma pulled back, embarrassed by the wet spot on his expensive shirt. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping at her eyes. "Stop apologizing." Nathaniel's voice was firm but kind. He reached up and gently wiped away a tear she had missed, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "You survived something terrible and you're still standing. That's not something to apologize for. That's something to be proud of." Emma's phone buzzed with a text from her roommate. Sarah's shift had ended early and she would be home in 20 minutes. Nathaniel nodded when Emma told him, but he didn't move toward the door. "I'm going to give you my personal cell number," he said. "Not my office line, not my assistant. My cell phone that I answer 24 hours a day. If you need anything, if you're scared, if you just want to talk, you call me." "Okay." Emma programmed the number into her phone with fingers that felt clumsy. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. For being there today, for helping with the locks, for just staying." "Emma." Nathaniel waited until she looked up at him. "I meant what I said earlier. I'm interested in you and I'd like to explore that when you're ready, but there's no pressure and no timeline. You focus on healing and feeling safe. Everything else can wait." He left just as Emma's roommate Sarah arrived, a whirlwind of concern and fury when Emma explained what had happened. Sarah made dinner while Emma sat at their small kitchen table and told the whole story, still processing everything that had occurred in the span of a few hours. "So let me get this straight," Sarah said, stirring pasta with more violence than strictly necessary. Your psycho ex breaks into your workplace, assaults you, and then a millionaire CEO literally sweeps in to save you, has locks installed on your apartment and confesses he's interested in you. Emma, this is like something out of a movie. It doesn't feel like a movie. Emma rubbed her wrist, which had started to bruise. It feels surreal. Are you interested in him? Sarah asked, her tone softening. This Nathaniel, Emma thought about the question carefully. Was she interested? She had been attracted to Nathaniel since their first appointment, drawn to his quiet strength and unexpected humor. But attraction was one thing. Trust was another entirely, and Emma's ability to trust men had been shattered by Derek's fists and manipulation. I don't know, she said honestly. I think I could be. But Sarah, I'm terrified. What if I'm wrong about him? What if he seems perfect now but turns out to be just like Derek? He's not like Derek. Sarah's voice was certain. Derek isolated you from your friends. Nathaniel made sure you weren't alone. Derek made decisions for you. Nathaniel asked permission before helping. Derek wanted control. Nathaniel wants you to feel safe. Those are fundamentally different men. Emma knew Sarah was right, but knowing something intellectually and believing it emotionally were two different things. She had thought Derek was perfect once too, had believed his jealousy was passion and his control was protection. How could she trust her own judgment now? That night, Emma lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying the day's events on an endless loop. Her phone sat on her nightstand, Nathaniel's number glowing in her recent contacts. She wondered if he was awake, if he was thinking about her the way she was thinking about him. As if in answer, her phone buzzed with a text. Just wanted to make sure you're okay. No need to respond if you're sleeping. Just know I'm here if you need anything. Emma stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, I'm awake. Can't seem to shut my brain off. The response came immediately. Understandable, today was a lot. Thank you again for everything. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there. You would have handled it. You're stronger than you think. Emma smiled at her phone in the darkness of her bedroom. How is your shoulder? I never got to finish your session. My shoulder is fine. I'm more concerned about your wrist. Are you icing it? She had forgotten entirely about her wrist in the chaos of the evening. I will now. Good. Ice 15 minutes on, 15 minutes off. You know the drill better than I do. They texted back and forth for another hour, the conversation meandering from injury care to books to the ridiculous crime show Sarah was watching in the living room. Nathaniel was easy to talk to, his responses thoughtful and often funny. By the time Emma finally said goodnight, her anxiety had settled into something manageable, and she fell asleep with her phone still in her hand. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of police statements and court dates. Derek's lawyer tried to argue for bail, but the judge reviewed the evidence, including the threatening texts, the previous restraining order, and the broken glass door, and decided Derek was a flight risk and a danger to Emma. He would remain in custody until trial. Emma returned to work after taking 3 days off, walking through the wellness center's new reinforced glass door and past the newly installed security system. Linda had hired a security guard for the front desk, a kind older man named Frank who reminded Emma of her grandfather and took his job very seriously. Nathaniel's appointments had been canceled while Emma was out, and she found herself disappointed not to see him. But on her first day back, he was her 2 o'clock session, walking through the door with a bouquet of sunflowers that made her eyes sting. I know you probably get a lot of roses, he said, handing them to her. But I remember you mentioning that sunflowers were your favorite because they always face the light. Emma buried her face in the bright yellow blooms, breathing in their faint, clean scent. You remembered that. I remember everything you tell me. Nathaniel's smile was warm. How are you doing? Really? Better, Emma said honestly. The nightmares have been bad, but my therapist says that's normal after a triggering event, and knowing Derek is in jail helps. My lawyer says with the evidence and his prior record, he's looking at significant prison time. Good. There was an edge of satisfaction in Nathaniel's voice. He deserves every second. They fell into the familiar rhythm of the therapy session, Emma guiding Nathaniel through exercises while they talked. It felt normal and comforting, this routine they had established. But there was something different now, a current of awareness that ran beneath their professional interaction. Emma found herself noticing the way Nathaniel's muscles moved under his skin, the way his breath hitched slightly when she adjusted his arm position, the way his eyes followed her around the room. I have a question, Nathaniel said as they finished the session. And you can absolutely say no. But there's a charity gala next Saturday for the Children's Hospital. I have to go because my company is a major sponsor, but I hate going to these things alone. Would you consider coming with me as my date? Emma's heart jumped into her throat. A date. A real, official date with Nathaniel Cross. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, but the cautious part of her brain, the part that had been trained by trauma, hesitated. I don't have anything to wear to a gala, she said, which wasn't what she meant to say at all. That's the easiest problem in the world to solve. Nathaniel's smile was gentle, like he understood all the things she wasn't saying. But what I'm really asking is whether you're ready to take this step. It's been 2 weeks since Derek showed up. I don't want to rush you into anything. I want to say yes, Emma admitted, but I'm scared. Not of you, she added quickly. Of myself, of making another mistake. Nathaniel reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and took her hand. His thumb brushed over the fading bruises on her wrist, his touch feather-light. Emma, you didn't make a mistake with Derek. He lied to you about who he was. That's not your fault. But I understand being scared, and I'm not going to pressure you. If you want to start slower, we can do that. Coffee, not a gala, a walk in the park. Whatever feels safe. No. Emma surprised herself with the firmness of her voice. I don't want to let fear control my life anymore. I want to go to the gala with you. I want to wear a fancy dress and eat tiny food and watch you be charming to rich people. Nathaniel laughed, the sound rich and warm. I'm not that charming. You're very charming, Emma corrected. It's slightly annoying. Only slightly. Nathaniel's eyes danced with humor. I must be losing my touch. They made plans for Nathaniel to pick her up at 6 on Saturday. After he left, Emma stood in the treatment room holding her sunflowers and wondering what she had just agreed to. A date with a millionaire. A gala with people who probably owned yachts and vacation homes and cars that cost more than her student loans. Sarah was thrilled when Emma told her, immediately insisting on a shopping trip. They spent the following Saturday afternoon in boutiques that made Emma's credit card cry, but eventually found a dress that took Emma's breath away. It was a deep emerald green that brought out her eyes, with a fitted bodice and a flowing skirt that made her feel like a princess. You look like you walked out of a fairy tale, Sarah said, her eyes misty. He's going to die when he sees you. The week passed with agonizing slowness and frightening speed all at once. Emma had 3 more therapy sessions with Nathaniel, and each one felt charged with anticipation. They texted every night, conversations that ranged from deep discussions about their childhoods to ridiculous debates about whether hot dogs were sandwiches. Emma learned that Nathaniel had grown up in modest circumstances, the son of a single mother who had worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over their heads. He had put himself through college with scholarships and student loans, then built his company from the ground up over 15 years. The money was relatively new, and he still wasn't entirely comfortable with the level of wealth he had achieved. "I never wanted to be rich," he told her during one of their late-night text conversations. "I just wanted to create something meaningful and make sure my mom never had to work herself to exhaustion again. The money was a side effect." "What does your mom do now?" Emma asked. "She runs a community center in the neighborhood where I grew up. We built it together 5 years ago. She says she's never been happier." Emma fell a little bit in love with him right then, lying in her bed at midnight while she read about a man who had achieved massive success and used it to give back to his community and take care of his mother. Saturday arrived wrapped in autumn sunshine and butterflies in Emma's stomach. She spent the afternoon getting ready, Sarah acting as her personal stylist and hype woman. When the doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock, Emma took a deep breath and opened the door. Nathaniel stood in the hallway, wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo that should have been illegal in at least 40 states. His dark hair was styled back from his face, and his eyes widened when he saw Emma, his gaze traveling from her carefully styled hair down to her strappy heels and back up again. "You're stunning," he said, his voice slightly rough. "I mean, you're always beautiful, but tonight you're absolutely stunning." Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You look pretty good yourself." "Pretty good," Nathaniel laughed, shaking his head. "I'll take it." He held out a corsage box, old-fashioned and sweet. "I wasn't sure if this was too much, but my mom always told me a gentleman brings flowers." Inside the box was a delicate wrist corsage of white roses and green hydrangeas that perfectly complemented her dress. Emma held out her wrist, the one that had finally stopped bruising, and let Nathaniel slip it on. His fingers lingered on her skin, his touch sending electricity up her arm. The gala was held at the city's most exclusive hotel, in a ballroom that looked like something out of a period drama. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting rainbow light across the marble floors. Women in designer gowns swirled past on the arms of men in expensive tuxedos, and Emma felt suddenly out of place despite her new dress. Nathaniel must have felt her hesitation because he leaned down to whisper in her ear. "Half these people are incredibly boring, I promise. Rich doesn't mean interesting." Emma laughed, some of her tension releasing. "What's the other half? Incredibly boring and pretentious." Nathaniel's grin was wicked. "Come on, let me introduce you to my sister. She's the only person here worth talking to besides you." Nathaniel's sister turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman named Claire who ran a nonprofit supporting domestic violence survivors. She took one look at Emma and pulled her into a hug that caught Emma completely off guard. "Thank you for not being another model my brother felt obligated to bring to this circus," Claire said. "The last 3 he brought barely said 2 words all night. I'm Claire, and I've heard a lot about you." "You have?" Emma glanced at Nathaniel, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "He mentioned you might be coming tonight," Claire said, her smile knowing. "And then he spent 45 minutes on the phone with me debating what color tie would best complement your dress based on a picture you posted on social media last month." "Claire," Nathaniel's tone was warning, but his sister just laughed. "He went with silver, by the way." "Excellent choice, little brother." The evening unfolded like a dream. Nathaniel introduced Emma to what felt like hundreds of people, always keeping a protective hand on the small of her back, always making sure she was included in conversations. When they sat down for dinner, he made her laugh with whispered commentary about the other guests. "See the man at table 4 with the terrible toupee? That's Richard Blackwell. He's going to spend the entire dinner talking about his yacht. Take a shot every time he says the word mahogany and you'll be under the table before dessert." Emma pressed her napkin to her mouth to stifle her giggles. "You're terrible. I'm honest." Nathaniel's hand found hers under the table, his fingers threading through hers. "Is this okay?" Emma squeezed his hand in response, her heart doing complicated gymnastics in her chest. "It's perfect." They danced after dinner, Nathaniel pulling Emma onto the floor for a slow song that made her grateful for the ballroom dance class she had taken in college. He was a good dancer, confident and leading without being pushy, and Emma found herself relaxing into his arms. "I'm really glad you came tonight," Nathaniel said softly, his breath stirring the hair near her ear. "I know this isn't your usual scene." "It's definitely not my usual scene," Emma agreed. "My usual Saturday night involves pizza, Netflix, and yoga pants, but I'm glad I came too. This is nice." "Just nice." Nathaniel pulled back slightly to look at her, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Fine. It's wonderful." Emma smiled up at him. "I feel like Cinderella." "Then I should probably tell you that I have no intention of letting you disappear at midnight." Nathaniel's voice dropped lower, intimate in the crowded ballroom. "I'd like to see you again, tomorrow if you're free, and the day after that. And as many days after that as you'll give me." Emma's breath caught. "Nathaniel, too much." He searched her face, his expression open and hopeful and a little nervous. "Tell me if I'm moving too fast." "You're not moving too fast," Emma said, and realized she meant it. "I'm just not used to someone being this honest about their intentions. Derek played so many games. Everything was a test or a manipulation. This feels different." "It is different." Nathaniel's hand tightened on her waist. "I'm not interested in games, Emma. I like you. I think you're brilliant and funny and stronger than you give yourself credit for. I want to spend time with you and see where this goes. That's as complicated as it gets." "I like you too," Emma whispered. "A lot." They stayed at the gala until nearly midnight, and when Nathaniel drove her home, he walked her up to her apartment like a gentleman from another era. At her door, he paused, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, and Emma loved that he asked, that he waited for her permission instead of just taking what he wanted. "Yes," she breathed, and then his lips were on hers, soft and warm and perfect. It was nothing like kissing Derek, which had always felt like Derek was trying to possess her. This was gentle and asking and giving all at once, a conversation conducted in the language of touch. When they pulled apart, Emma felt dizzy. "Tomorrow?" Nathaniel asked, his forehead resting against hers. "Tomorrow," Emma agreed. Tomorrow turned into the day after and the day after that. Nathaniel courted her with old-fashioned dedication, taking her to dinner and museums, and a cooking class where they laughed themselves sick, trying to make pasta from scratch. He integrated seamlessly into her life, joining her for her Saturday morning volunteer sessions at the youth center, and charming the kids by getting thoroughly destroyed in basketball. He met her parents via video call when they called from California, and won them over by asking thoughtful questions about their retirement and remembering details from Emma's stories. He brought coffee to the wellness center when he knew Emma had early morning shifts, always remembered to ask how her PT sessions with other clients were going, and sent her random texts throughout the day that made her smile. A month after their first date, Derek's trial took place. Emma sat in the courtroom with Nathaniel holding her hand, and watched as her ex-boyfriend was sentenced to 4 years in prison for assault, stalking, and violating a restraining order. When the judge read the sentence, Emma felt something loosen in her chest that had been locked tight since the day Derek first raised his hand to her. Outside the courthouse, Nathaniel pulled her into his arms. "It's over," he said. "He can't hurt you anymore." "I know." Emma buried her face in his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. "Thank you for being here. There's nowhere else I would be." Nathaniel kissed the top of her head. "I love you, Emma. I've been wanting to say that for weeks, but I didn't want to pressure you, but I do. I love you." Emma pulled back to look up at him, her eyes stinging with happy tears. "I love you too. I think I have for a while, but I was scared to admit it. You never have to be scared with me," Nathaniel promised. "I'm not going anywhere." 6 months later, Emma moved into Nathaniel's penthouse apartment with its ridiculous view of the city and a kitchen bigger than her entire previous apartment. They adopted a rescue dog named Murphy, who slept on the bed between them and barked at squirrels with aggressive dedication. Emma continued working at the wellness center, turning down Nathaniel's offer to fund her own practice because she loved her colleagues and clients too much to leave. Nathaniel proposed on the 1-year anniversary of the day they met, getting down on one knee in the wellness center's reception area where Derek had shattered the door and Nathaniel had promised to protect Emma. "This is where I knew," he said, his eyes bright with emotion. "I knew that day that I would spend the rest of my life making sure you felt safe and loved and cherished. Marry me, Emma. Let me protect you and care for you and love you for the rest of our lives." Emma said yes through happy tears, and the wellness center staff, who had been hiding in the treatment rooms, erupted in cheers. They got married in a garden ceremony the following spring, surrounded by friends and family. Claire was the maid of honor, and Nathaniel's mother cried through the entire ceremony. Emma's parents flew in from California, and her father told Nathaniel during the reception that he had never seen his daughter so happy. "I spent a lot of time being angry that Derek hurt her," her father said quietly. "But if she hadn't gone through that, she might not have been working at that wellness center on the day you walked in. Maybe everything happens for a reason." Emma didn't know if she believed in fate or destiny or things happening for a reason. But she believed in second chances and healing and love that felt safe instead of suffocating. She believed in late-night conversations and sunflowers and men who asked permission before kissing you. She believed in building a life with someone who saw your strength instead of your vulnerability, who wanted to support you instead of control you. 2 years after their wedding, Emma opened her own physical therapy practice with Nathaniel's support, specializing in working with survivors of domestic violence. She partnered with Claire's nonprofit, offering free services to women who were rebuilding their lives after leaving abusive relationships. The practice was everything Emma had dreamed of, a bright space filled with hope and healing. On the wall of her office, she hung a photo from the day the wellness center door was shattered. It had been taken by a security camera and showed Nathaniel stepping between Emma and Derek, his posture protective and certain. Below it, she hung their wedding photo, the two of them laughing in the golden afternoon light. Nathaniel found her standing in front of the photos on the practice's opening day, his arms sliding around her waist from behind. "Thinking about that day?" he asked. "Thinking about how far I've come since then," Emma corrected, leaning back against his chest. "Thinking about how I almost let fear stop me from taking a chance on you." "I would have waited," Nathaniel said. "However long it took, you were worth waiting for." Emma turned in his arms, reaching up to kiss him. "I'm glad I didn't make you wait too long. Every second was worth it." Nathaniel kissed her back, deep and loving and full of promise. "Every single second." 5 years after the day Derek shattered the glass door, Emma gave birth to twin girls with Nathaniel's dark hair and her determined chin. They named them Hope and Grace, and Nathaniel held them like they were made of spun glass, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his daughters for the first time. "We made these," he said in wonder, his voice thick with emotion. "These perfect little humans." Emma watched her husband cradle their daughters and thought about the scared woman she had been that terrible October afternoon. She thought about how trauma had tried to convince her that she didn't deserve love or safety or happiness. She thought about the courage it had taken to open her heart again, to trust again, to believe that not all men were like Derek. And she thought about Nathaniel, who had walked into her life and promised to protect her, and had kept that promise every single day since. Who had shown her what real love looked like, what real partnership felt like. Who had given her space to heal while standing ready to catch her if she fell. Their daughters grew up in a home filled with laughter and safety and love. They learned early that their mother was strong and their father was gentle, and that real love looked like respect and trust and choosing each other every single day. They learned that sometimes people went through hard things, but that hard things didn't have to define your whole story. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathaniel surprised Emma with a trip back to the wellness center where they had met. Linda had retired, but the new owner welcomed them warmly, taking them to the reception area where a small plaque had been mounted on the wall. "In memory of courage and new beginnings," Emma read aloud, her eyes filling with tears. The plaque included the date Derek had shown up, the date Nathaniel had promised to protect her, the date their forever had begun. "Linda had it made before she retired," Nathaniel explained, his hand finding Emma's. "She said this place was where miracles happened, and she wanted to remember the day she witnessed one." Emma turned to her husband, this man who had kept every promise he had ever made to her, who had shown her what love was supposed to feel like. "Do you think we're a miracle?" "I think you're a miracle," Nathaniel corrected. "I'm just the lucky man who got to love you." They stood in that reception area for a long time, remembering the day that had changed everything. The fear and the broken glass and the moment Nathaniel had stepped between Emma and danger without hesitation. The beginning of forever, wrapped in violence and protection and the promise of something better. Emma had learned a lot of things in the years since that day. She had learned that healing wasn't linear, that some days were harder than others, that trauma left scars, but scars could fade with time and love and therapy. She had learned that she was stronger than she ever imagined, that she deserved good things, that her past didn't have to dictate her future. But most importantly, she had learned that real love didn't hurt. Real love felt safe and warm and steady. Real love asked permission and respected boundaries and chose you every single day. Real love looked like Nathaniel Cross stepping between her and danger, promising to protect her, and then spending the rest of his life keeping that promise. The twins started first grade that fall, and Emma expanded her practice to include a mentorship program for young women learning about healthy relationships. Nathaniel's company launched an initiative to build affordable housing for domestic violence survivors, giving them safe places to rebuild their lives. They built their lives on the foundation of that terrible October day, using their pain to fuel their purpose, their love to light the way forward. And every night when Nathaniel pulled Emma close and whispered that he loved her, she believed him completely, because real love didn't just promise protection. Real love delivered it, day after day, year after year, in moments big and small. Real love looked like Nathaniel Cross seeing a woman in danger and refusing to walk away, then choosing that same woman every day for the rest of his life. Emma had survived Derek's violence and lived to build something beautiful on the other side of trauma. She had found love that healed instead of hurt, partnership that empowered instead of diminished, safety that felt real because it was real. And every time she looked at Nathaniel, every time he smiled at her across the dinner table or held her hand during a movie or kissed her goodnight, Emma thought about the day he had promised to protect her and how that promise had become the foundation of their forever. The glass door had shattered, but Emma had not. She had bent, she had survived, and ultimately she had thrived. And the man who had promised to protect her that day had kept his promise, not by controlling her or making decisions for her, but by standing beside her as she rebuilt her life into something stronger and more beautiful than before. That was real love. That was real protection. That was what happily ever after actually looked like. And Emma was grateful every single day that she had been brave enough to reach for it.